The focus of Tier 1 is improving core instruction. At this level, the teacher must engage in deep analysis about teaching. Questions such as, what do I know about my students and how am I using this knowledge in planning instruction? How is it that the way I teach responds to my students' background and learning styles? How am I scaffolding instruction for all of my students? Are primary constituents of Tier 1. Teachers who spend time analyzing their beliefs and values about teaching and learning encounter their assumptions about how teaching looks like and learning happens. These assumptions are deeply connected with the choices they make for their classrooms and students. Invariably, these teachers also understand that there are as many ways of teaching and learning as there are students and teachers in the world. As a result, they are prepared to accept the way they teach will not fit the learning styles of all students in their classrooms. These teachers spend time learning about each student in their classroom, and in the presence of student failure, they first questioned the way the concept was presented, the way the lesson was delivered, and the appropriateness of the strategies that were offered. These teachers adapt. This acceptance leads to persistent engagement in self-reflection. They understand the value of peer evaluation and collaboration. These teachers also understand that developing flexibility in pedagogical presentation is intimately integrated with the process of self-improvement. I initiate each day of teaching with a reflection on a simple yet complex statement. Teaching begins and ends with seeing the student. I am therefore always curious about the person before me, their interests and areas of wonder. I'm always curious about a student's awareness of herself as a learner. In this statement, the teacher realizes that the student is at the very center of the learning process, indicated by begins and ends. Curricular content comes second in the process of lesson development and delivery. Who the student is weaved throughout the lesson creation. However, there are many students in a classroom, so how can all students be considered the same way? Not all students are considered in the same way, and as a result, not all students are served in the same manner or to the same extent. Therefore, the opportunity to circle back and redesign instructional presentations is not only appropriate, but it's also fair. This activity is at the very center of Tier 1. Teacher A understands the complexity of student-centered teaching. Furthermore, for Teacher A, the student is not measured by his or her abilities, but rather by the totality of being. This is indicated by the statement, student awareness of herself as a learner. Students' ability to learn is linked to their own perception of self as a learner. When we consider a student in their totality of being, we are better prepared as teachers to serve all aspects of the student, thereby supporting the development of a mindset for learning. The statement also indicates approach to teaching and learning that lacks the traditional linearity of process, where a teacher teaches and students learn. The statement suggests the belief that the process of teaching and learning is constructive, multifaceted, personal, and most of all, messy at its core. Developing a presence of mind that pushes us to see, observe, and understand each student is critical. We need to develop not only the capacity to see the student, but also the courage to see ourselves in relation to the multiple social and cultural locations that our students inhabit. Our own perpetual self-examination at the intersections of our social, cultural, political, and economic locations is crucial. Self-awareness is a decisive step in engendering a strong ethic of care. Teacher B embraces the philosophical persona that teaching requires. Developing the capacity to seeing the student results in increasing capacity to seeing ourselves. This teacher goes well beyond seeing the student. Observing and understanding are critical and integral part of seeing. When we observe, we take into account every aspect of behavior in context, and we must make every attempt at understanding the student's behavior, response, frame of mind, etc. This is understanding without judgment or evaluation of behavior. In this reflection, the teacher goes on to explain what is needed for this type of pedagogical setup. Teachers must enter into self-examination. Self-examination requires courage because it entails our recognition that our way of doing and seeing is not necessarily the intended or best way for others. This process also entails the release of control. As teachers, we must recognize and accept that we need not be in control of the knowledge and or environment. This process is contrary to the historical culture of teaching, a culture that presents the teacher as the holder of knowledge, the knower, the controller. The process of becoming a teacher requires then that we become the critics of the very culture and the very way we were taught to teach. For this, we need courage. It is then fitting that serving a population of very diverse students begins with teacher self-examination. The self-examination we conduct as teachers must include deep, substantive reflections about our social, cultural, political, and economic locations in the fold of who our students are and come from. Schools must be environments with strong ethics of care, and this is only possible when teachers consciously enter such environments prepared to exercise reflective practice. In this way, schools and classrooms become a place of equity. I make every attempt to approach lessons through various pedagogical strategies. I normally initiate by introducing the objectives of the lesson and our process. In doing so, I may provide students with some brief justification regarding why the pedagogical approaches. Teacher C negotiates methodology in the context of who the students are as individual beings. The variety of pedagogical strategic approaches responds to the acknowledgement that students have a variety of strengths and needs and come from a variety of places and linguistic backgrounds, and that the group is never monolithic. So accepting that students are individual is the platform of choice of methodology. Teacher C explains that introduction of objectives and justification of process must be provided. Again, this action places students at the center of instruction. These actions offer students the opportunity not only to understand what is expected of them, but opens up sites of exchanges and negotiation, thus empowering students in their own learning. We begin this discussion by acknowledging the importance of teachers as philosophical beings with specific superpowers, the superpowers of reflection, humility, and increased self-awareness. These superpowers must be consciously developed and continuously sustained.